It started with a fiery remark, one that instantly lit up headlines across North America. During a high-profile press conference in Washington, former President Donald Trump took direct aim at America's northern neighbor. In a tone that mixed frustration and accusation, he declared, "Canada isn't innocent. They've been letting drugs flow across our border like never before." Within minutes, the clip went viral. The phrase, "they're not innocent," began trending on social media, sparking outrage, disbelief, and renewed tension between two countries that share the longest undefended border in the world. For years, discussions about border control have centered around the southern frontier with Mexico. But Trump's sudden focus on the north, and on Canada specifically, marked a stunning shift. The remarks came amid reports of increasing synthetic drug trafficking networks that exploit less monitored routes, including air and sea corridors from Canada into U.S. states like Michigan, Vermont, and New York. Intelligence briefings had quietly warned of a growing pipeline of fentanyl precursors, illegal pharmaceuticals, and smuggled cannabis products entering through the northern border. Trump seized on these reports as evidence that the problem was being ignored. "Everyone talks about the South," he said, gesturing to the podium, "but nobody wants to talk about what's happening up north. It's just as bad, maybe worse. Canada is looking the other way." Almost immediately, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office issued a statement rejecting the accusations as misleading and politically motivated. Canadian officials emphasized their country's extensive cooperation with U.S. law enforcement, citing ongoing joint operations and intelligence sharing programs targeting cross-border trafficking. Canada remains a trusted and active partner in combating illegal narcotics, the statement read. Any suggestion otherwise misrepresents the facts. But Trump's comments struck a nerve, and perhaps that was the point. Behind the scenes, advisors close to Trump saw an opportunity. With U.S. domestic issues surrounding opioids and synthetic drugs worsening, shifting the narrative northward could reframe the conversation. By suggesting that the problem wasn't just coming from Mexico or China, but also from Canada, Trump could expand his America First message into a broader critique of global negligence. Within hours, conservative media outlets amplified the claim. Talk radio hosts and online commentators began dissecting the issue, showing maps of potential trafficking routes, aerial images of checkpoints in upstate New York, and statistics about drug seizures along the U.S.-Canada border. The tone was urgent. Canada, long viewed as a friendly and cooperative ally, was now being painted as complacent, maybe even complicit. On social media, reactions were split. Supporters of Trump hailed the move as long overdue, arguing that the northern border had been ignored for too long. They pointed to small towns in the Midwest hit by opioid overdoses, arguing that every border matters. Critics, however, accused Trump of scapegoating a key ally for domestic political gain. Hashtags like #BlameCanada and #NorthBorderCrisis began trending, with memes and videos flooding the internet. Meanwhile, the White House press corps scrambled to verify the claims. Data from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency showed that while most drug seizures occurred at the southern border, the northern crossings had seen a steady increase in synthetic narcotics over the past 2 years. Small but significant spikes in fentanyl-related seizures in Detroit, Buffalo, and Seattle pointed to emerging smuggling routes, though the sources of these networks were complex and not limited to Canada itself. Trump's critics argued that the remarks oversimplified a global problem. Fentanyl precursors often originate from China, moving through global supply chains before entering the United States through multiple channels, including Mexico, Europe, and yes, occasionally Canada. But the reality of the situation was far more complicated than Trump's soundbite suggested. Nevertheless, politically, the impact was immediate. Trump's comments dominated the 24-hour news cycle, drawing reactions from both Republicans and Democrats. Some lawmakers from northern states expressed support, demanding tougher inspections at border crossings and ports of entry. Others warned that escalating rhetoric against Canada could jeopardize crucial trade and security partnerships. Canadian media covered the controversy extensively, often with a tone of disbelief. "We're being blamed for America's drug crisis?" Read one editorial in the Globe and Mail. Analysts in Ottawa noted that Trump's remarks seemed designed to stir nationalist sentiment rather than address specific policy failures. Still, behind closed doors, Canadian officials expressed concern that the rhetoric could harden U.S. attitudes toward bilateral cooperation, especially as trade negotiations and defense partnerships hung in the balance. In Washington, Trump allies doubled down. Senator Tom Cotton called for an immediate investigation into northern border trafficking, while Trump campaign surrogates framed the issue as proof of weak international oversight. Trump's right, one aide said on television. For decades, we've had this myth that Canada is spotless, perfect, friendly. But the truth is, drugs don't stop at the 49th parallel. Meanwhile, Trudeau faced growing domestic pressure. Opposition parties in Canada accused his administration of being too soft in responding to Trump's claims. They demanded public evidence proving Canada's enforcement efforts, with some right-wing politicians arguing that Trudeau had allowed cross-border smuggling to go unchecked. The controversy threatened to inflame political tensions in Ottawa, where Trudeau's leadership had already been under scrutiny over economic and trade issues. Amid the noise, border communities found themselves caught in the middle. Local mayors in towns like Windsor, Niagara Falls, and Blaine spoke out, insisting that the cross-border relationship remain strong. Many highlighted daily trade and cultural ties that would be jeopardized if public sentiment turned hostile. Our livelihoods depend on that border staying open and cooperative, one official said. We can't let politics poison it. Economists, too, warned of ripple effects. The last thing North America needed, they argued, was another round of tensions between two of its largest trading partners. Any move towards stricter border enforcement could slow down shipments of auto parts, agricultural goods, and consumer products, potentially disrupting already fragile supply chains. By the end of the week, the Trump campaign released a short policy video expanding on his remarks. The video featured dramatic music, images of drug busts, and Border Patrol agents. The message was clear: every border counts. We will secure America, north and south. It was a calculated attempt to turn a single remark into a campaign pillar. Political analysts saw a familiar pattern. Trump had a knack for taking complex international issues and distilling them into emotional narratives that resonated with his base. By reframing the drug crisis as a cross-border betrayal, he reignited nationalist sentiments, while positioning himself once again as the defender of America's sovereignty. For Trudeau, the challenge was twofold: maintaining diplomatic composure while defending his country's reputation. His government scheduled high-level meetings with U.S. officials to reaffirm Canada's commitment to joint enforcement. Behind the scenes, diplomats worked to cool tensions, emphasizing collaboration rather than confrontation. Still, the rhetoric took on a life of its own. Talk of a northern crisis dominated right-wing platforms in the United States, while Canadian commentators worried about the long-term damage to the two nations' trust. Even as officials tried to downplay the controversy, the political and emotional impact lingered. Weeks later, Trump revisited the topic during a rally in Michigan. His tone was more defiant than ever. "We love our Canadian friends," he said, pausing for effect. "But friendship doesn't mean letting drugs destroy our communities. We're going to fix that fast." The crowd roared, waving flags and chanting his name. Whether or not the claims hold up under scrutiny, the episode marked another chapter in the turbulent relationship between Trump and Trudeau, one defined by tariffs, trade disputes, and now accusations of border negligence. It demonstrated how easily diplomacy can be overshadowed by politics, how quickly allies can become targets in the theater of public opinion. In the end, what began as a single quote became a symbol of something larger: the fragility of even the closest alliances when national narratives collide. For Americans, it reignited debate over the country's drug crisis and border control. For Canadians, it reopened an old wound: the feeling of being misunderstood, underestimated, and occasionally blamed by their powerful neighbor. Trump's accusation, though controversial, achieved its purpose. It shifted attention, stirred conversation, and reminded both nations that politics, like borders, is never static. Whether the northern drug surge becomes a lasting policy issue or just another flashpoint in a long political saga remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: once again, Donald Trump has managed to turn a quiet concern into a continental storm.